Okay, Marc Lamont Hill has been fired by CNN, and I will give my take on what my opinion is on that after we review kind of what he said. I'm going in at 14 minutes and 53 seconds in this clip from UN Watch. UN Watch, they shared the entire speech, but UN Watch is a pro-Israel organization. I've seen some of their stuff, and I think their chief Hillel Neuer is a former Israeli diplomat. But this is the full speech. I will post the full speech in the description afterward. And I actually saw Anthony Logan's video on this as well, which was pretty good. I think he did a good job. um, but let's get to it.
Solidarity demands that we no longer allow politicians or political parties to remain silent on the question of Palestine. We can no longer, in particular, allow the political left to remain radical or even progressive on every issue, from the environment to war to the economy, to remain progressive on every issue except for Palestine. Contrary to Western mythology, black resistance to American apartheid did not come purely through Gandhian nonviolence. Rather, slave revolts and self-defense and tactics otherwise divergent from Dr. King or Mahatma Gandhi were equally important to preserving safety and attaining freedom. We must allow...
So what he was saying is that, probably in reference to Nat Turner and a number of slave revolts, was that in the process of getting slavery eliminated in the United States, there were violent incidents where slaves would overthrow their masters. He's not saying anything that's untrue, but look at where he's getting to. And also understand that the 1800s, when slavery was in existence, there were a lot of other violent conflicts as well. But I think that Marc Lamont Hill is trying to insinuate something here that he's not really willing to say out in the open. And I think this is what got him fired, and we'll discuss after that what exactly is the issue with that and whether I think it's justified. But I think we'll actually let this play out as far as we can.
If we are to operate in true solidarity with Palestinian people, we must allow the Palestinian people the same range of opportunity and political possibility. If we are standing in solidarity with Palestinian people, we must recognize the right of an occupied people to defend itself. We must prioritize peace. But we must not romanticize or fetishize it. We must advocate and promote nonviolence at every opportunity, but we cannot endorse a narrow politics of respectability that shames Palestinians for resisting, for refusing to do nothing in the face of state violence and ethnic cleansing. At the current moment, there is little reason for optimism. Optimism, of course, is the belief that good will inevitably prevail over evil, that justice will inevitably win out. In the course of human history, and certainly even in the course of the United Nations, there is no evidence of such a proposition. Optimism is unsophisticated. Optimism is immature. Optimism is what my students have when they take examinations that they did not study for. Some become quite religious at that time. But regardless of their strategies of optimism, the outcome is far from guaranteed or even likely. What I'm challenging us to do in the spirit of solidarity is not to embrace optimism, but to embrace radical hope. Radical hope is a belief that despite the odds, despite the considerable measures against justice and peace, despite the legacy of hatred and imperialism and white supremacy and patriarchy and homophobia, despite these systems of power that have normalized settler colonialism, despite these structures, we can still win. We can still prevail. One motivation for my hope in the liberation and ultimate self-determination of the Palestinian people comes in August of 2014. Black Americans were in Ferguson, Missouri, in the Midwest of the United States, protesting the death of a young man named Michael Brown, an unarmed African-American male who had been killed by a law enforcement agent. And as we protested, I saw two things that provided hope for the Palestinian struggle. One was that for the first time in my entire life of activism, I saw a sea of Palestinian people. I saw a sea of Palestinian flags in the crowd saying that we must form a solidarity project. We must struggle together in order to resist, because state violence in the United States and state violence in Brazil and state violence in Syria and state violence in Egypt and state violence in South Africa and state violence in Palestine are all of the same sort. And we finally understood that we must work together and not.
Okay, this is what Marc Lamont Hill was saying. He was tweeting yesterday saying that he called out all these other countries for their violence against the people. But his use of the Mike Brown analogy and other things that I think he's going to say pretty soon, they kind of show that whether you think what he says is offensive, which I don't care about. I don't care about taking offense. I don't take offense to anything Marc Lamont Hill says. I think he's been a court jester his entire life, but they basically have no basis in real logic.
Turn on each other, but instead turn to each other. And later that night, when the police began to tear gas us, Miriam Barghouti tweeted us from Ramallah. She, along with other Palestinian youth activists, told us that the tear gas that we were experiencing was only temporary. They gave us tips for how to wash our eyes out. They told us how to make gas masks out of T-shirts. They gave us permission to think and dream beyond our local conditions by giving us a transnational or a global solidarity project. And from those tweets and social media messages, we began then to organize together. We brought a delegation of black activists to Palestine, and we saw the connections between the police in New York City who were being trained by Israeli soldiers and the type of policing we were experiencing in New York City. We began to see relationships of resistance, and we began to build and struggle and organize together. That spirit of solidarity, a solidarity that is bound up not just in ideology, but in action, is the way out. So as we stand here on the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the tragic commemoration of the Nakba, we have an opportunity to not just offer solidarity in words, but to commit to political action, grassroots action, local action, and international action that will give us what justice requires. And that is a free Palestine from the river to the sea. Thank you for your time.
I very sincerely thank Mr.
Okay, so you see there that the Michael Brown analogy and Ferguson and all of that is what really played a huge role, according to Marc Lamont Hill, in this big unity between the Palestinian cause and everything like that. I'd like to remind people, okay? You might be a supporter of Black Lives Matter. You might be a supporter of reducing police on citizen violence, police on black people violence. The fact of the matter is that, and I have the DOJ report right here, there was never, the DOJ under Attorney General Loretta Lynch, who was a black woman, who is very much a supporter of police oversight by the Justice Department, they concluded that there was no prosecutive merit to pursue Officer Darren Wilson, the person who shot Mike Brown. It says, as discussed above, Darren Wilson has stated his intent in shooting Michael Brown was in response to a perceived deadly threat. The only possible basis for prosecuting Wilson under Section 242 would therefore be if the government could prove that his account is not true, i.e. that Brown never assaulted Wilson at the SUV, never attempted to gain control of Wilson's gun, and thereafter clearly surrendered in a way that no reasonable officer could have failed to perceive. Given that Wilson's account is corroborated by physical evidence, and that his perception of a threat posed by Brown is corroborated by other eyewitnesses to include aspects of the testimony of Witness 101, there is no credible evidence that Wilson willfully shot Brown as he was attempting to surrender or was otherwise not posing a threat. Even if Wilson was mistaken in his interpretation of Brown's conduct, the fact that the others interpreted that conduct the same way as Wilson precludes a determination that he acted with a bad purpose to disobey the law. So what they're referring to is that there were a couple other witnesses, and I read this report about 3 years ago, in 2015, close to when it came out. There were other witnesses that backed up Darren Wilson, and they were other Ferguson residents, black people. And, as much as you would like to deny it, there's no evidence that Wilson acted untoward in this situation. The same is true even if Wilson could be said to have acted with poor judgment in the manner in which he first interacted with Brown or in pursuing Brown after the incident at the SUV. These are matters of policy and procedure that do not rise to the level of a constitutional violation and thus cannot support a criminal prosecution. So then they cite this case saying that violation of internal policies and procedures does not in and of itself rise to violation of the Constitution. And then it says, because Wilson did not act with the requisite criminal intent, it cannot be proven beyond reasonable doubt to a jury that he violated 18 U.S.C. 242 when he fired his weapon at Brown. I believe 242 is the statute, federal statute against murder. Conclusion, for the reasons set forth above, this matter lacks prosecutive merit and should be closed. So Marc Lamont Hill is basing his entire support for Palestine over his protest at the Ferguson incident, the Ferguson protests slash riots. He's basing it on a protest that was mounted on false pretenses. The false pretenses were that Michael Brown had his hands up. Remember the whole thing about hands up, don't shoot. And this is the reason I have a problem with having to defend somebody. I'll defend the free speech of anyone. And I don't believe that you should be fired because you say stupid things. Marc Lamont Hill has been saying stupid things his entire career. There is a video that has been taken off the internet, and I'll try to find at least a transcript of it, where it says, here we go. This is from 2014. Following a video by Malik King in which the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge is converted into the Pull Your Pants Up Challenge, CNN contributor Marc Lamont Hill argued the challenge internalized the idea that black men bear a partial responsibility for attracting undue police attention. It suggests that somehow there's a connection between black male profiling and our pants being sagging. Lamont Hill said, before black people pulled their pants down, they were still being locked up. If we continue to tell young men that they can behave or dress or otherwise demonstrate their way out of police oppression or police abuse, then we're blaming the victim. Then he says, I find it hard to believe that Mark would be as educated as he is and as much as he has contributed to the black community in trying to overcome the negativity that's in the community, that he would actually sit here and try to justify emulating bad behavior. The Blaze's Tara Setmeyer replied. Tara Setmeyer, by the way, is the woman who recently claimed that Kanye West is what happens when black people don't read. She's a different word for black people, but that's her. That's this woman here on the right. So I don't really have any love for her. Lamont Hill argued that the white students he taught at Columbia and the white kids he saw in the suburbs were able to wear their pants low without contributing to their own racial profiling, causing Setmeyer to say the real problem was a lack of self-reflection in the black community. Let's see if this works. You'll see yourself. I couldn't find this video
all the
anywhere.
tax laws. Thank you for your complicated rules. Is tearing my hair out a qualified medical expense?
I guess we're going to have to sit through this.
Hire a CPA. You'll thank yourself.
Oh my God. Tax season already. Sorry, guys.
All right, the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge might have changed awareness, raising forever. The latest incarnation isn't raising money for a disease, though. Instead, this one carries a message. Take a look.
So I'm hearing there's a new challenge going on, right? Somebody named Charles challenged a friend of mine, Mike, and then Mike challenged myself. So now I'm challenging Robert, Nick, and Proshon. Y'all ready to see what the new challenge is? Pull your damn pants up. We're quick in our communities to talk about racial profiling, about how the cops are targeting young black men. But what we don't want to focus on is what we're doing to contribute to the problem, even if just a little bit. We need to start thinking about how we represent ourselves, how we talk, how we act, how we deal with police. We need to stop talking, acting, and living like thugs and start talking, acting, and living like men. Stop making a conscious decision to fit the description.
All right, Malik King is the man in that video, and he's joining us right now in New York. Good to see you.
Good to see you, ma'am. How are you?
I'm good. So what's been the reception from this challenge? Are you seeing that, young men are pulling up their pants more, or anyone commenting to you about the video challenge you issued?
Well, ma'am, I'm noticing that there are people who approve of the challenge, there are people who disapprove of the challenge. Since I issued the challenge, I've had an overwhelming amount of support from people, friend requests, over 3,000 friend requests, just inboxes, just telling me that they support the challenge and they support what it stands for. It is a challenge that is forcing individuals to think about the way that they choose to represent themselves and how your presentation can influence, perception.
So what's the message in your view that is being sent when a young man wears his pants? It's no longer just slightly, below the waistline. Now it's all the way under the butt.
I want to remind you guys that this topic warranted a 10-minute segment on CNN in 2014. So no, racial bullshit was not created during the Trump era.
But, right about the thigh area. What's the message that's being sent in your view? What are they trying to say?
Well, what I'm trying to say, ma'am, is that this trend is not something that began in the hip-hop culture, like some like to say. It's not a trend that began somewhere in the black community. This is a trend that began in prison. And we know for various reasons it began in prison. And I don't think that any trend that comes from prison, a negative place, is something that we should be allowing to continue. It's not something that we should be willing to enforce. It should be something that we want to keep in prison where it belongs. It doesn't belong with the society.
All right, well, I'm going to open this up and invite a couple more people to the panel and talk some more about this. Let's bring in Tara Setmeyer, co-host of Real News on the Blaze TV, and CNN political commentator Marc Lamont Hill, also back. So, Marc, let me hear from you, because apparently, I hear, you don't like this challenge. Why?
I disagree with its premise, and I disagree with the belief that this has anything to do with young black men being criminalized. I saw the campaign, I saw the full 44-second clip, and I also read the description. And it suggests, and the brother just said it a little bit right now, that somehow there's a connection between black male profiling and our pants being sagging. Well, the truth is, before black people pulled their pants down, they were still getting locked up. So there's absolutely no connection between the two. The idea that it begins in prison is actually an urban myth, an urban legend. There's absolutely no evidence to suggest that. But even if it did, that still doesn't justify police profiling. And my concern is that if we continue to tell young black men that they can behave or dress or otherwise demonstrate their way out of police oppression or police abuse, then we're blaming the victim here. People can make good, healthy choices like not committing crimes, like going to school, all that good stuff. But pulling your pants down has absolutely nothing to do with police, and I think it's a dangerous message we send.
So, Malik?
Well, what I have to say to that is being an African-American from the ghetto myself, and just seeing what I see in my community on a daily basis, seeing how we are destroying our own communities. Now, I understand, and I agree 100% that racial profiling is a big issue. I understand that. I also understand that racism is a big issue. I understand that. I also understand that there are crooked cops out there who may not have anything better to do but target young black men. I understand that's not a popular opinion, but that also does happen. That is also true. But I like to think of things from both sides of the coin. If you have a strong police presence in your community, on one hand, it could be because maybe cops have nothing better to do, but then on another hand, it could be because we are in our communities reinforcing these negative stereotypes. It could very well be because we are littering and graffiti, you know, in our communities. It could very well be that we are making the conscious decision to reinforce negativity and not positivity. And it does directly relate to perception.
So, Tara, how do you see this? Because we are talking about a few different things here, you know, we're talking about how it may contribute or not to profiling or to the degradation of a young man's image. Tara, how are you, digesting this conversation and this campaign, and how useful, in your view, might it be?
Sorry, this is one of the weirdest segments I've ever seen. And I think all four of these people are feeling awkward about it, except for the guy who made the video, who's thrilled. They're feeling awkward about it for different reasons. I would say that the host and Tara Setmeyer don't really have to deal with this issue. So they're kind of looking at it from kind of the balcony view. So that's why I think they find it very awkward. Also, they probably don't have to pull their pants up because, this is more a trend among men of the black community, if I may say that.
Well, I applaud Malik because what he's saying, he's 100% correct. Now, I find it hard to believe that Mark would be as educated as he is, as much as he has contributed to the black community and trying to overcome the negativity that's in the community, that he would actually sit here and try to justify emulating bad behavior. And also, to set the record straight, my husband was a correctional officer early in his career, and the sagging of the pants is absolutely originating from prison culture. It started with not being able to wear belts, and then it turned into something else with a sexual invitation in prison. So for anyone to sit here and try to make excuses for bad behavior, it's easier to perpetuate victimhood and blame everyone else for issues rather than teaching responsibility for your behavior and empowerment. And I think that's the message that Malik is saying. In the real world, presentation matters. Professor Marc Lamont Hill,
but that's not the point.
Your pants sagging down? If you stood up right now, are your pants sagging down below your behind? I don't think so.
Mark.
Well, I'm nearly 36 years old, so no, my pants aren't sagging. At 16, they were, and I think I turned out okay. I still got an Ivy League PhD. And
Wait a
Malik,
minute.
I grew up in the hood, too. I grew up in the hood.
You were wearing your pants down low, like we're seeing
Why?
right now?
Yeah, of course. Why? Because that's what people do. Again, I think you all are making two different arguments.
People sag their pants because that's what people do. That's what I'll always remember about Marc Lamont Hill. Even though I'm sure he's not going anywhere, he'll probably turn up somewhere else.
Arguments are conflating the two. Hear me out. Whether or not we like sagging pants, when I walk into a store and I see a kid with his butt hanging out, I don't like it either. I don't like the way it looks. And I tell kids, when I taught high school, I told kids to pull their pants.
So support the fucking video, dumbass.
Because I didn't like the way it looks. But there's a difference between.
Oh, so you wore it like that when you were 16. Now that you teach when you were teaching in high school, you didn't like the way it looked, so you told them how to do that. You told them to pull their pants up. So either it is okay or it's not okay, Mark.
That and suggesting that quote-unquote bad behavior is somehow a sign of criminality and somehow warrants the type of impact that police have in our communities. Because guess what? When I taught at Columbia University, my white students also had that. When I go through the suburbs of Philadelphia, where I didn't grow up, I grew up in North Philly, but when I look in the suburbs, they have it too. And guess what? Police aren't using that as a pretext to arrest them, to terrorize them, or to shoot them with their hands up. We have to stop blaming black people for police poor behavior. No. Yes, we can correct our own behavior, but they have nothing to do with each other.
We need to blame black people for not having self-reflection, for making excuses within their own community for bad behavior. That's the problem. Why doesn't, you have the NAACP actually going after a town in Florida who's trying to have an ordinance saying that we don't want people's underwear hanging out and their pants sagging down. Maybe the NAACP should hold a workshop teaching young black men how to wear.
Okay, I think that law is kind of bullshit. I think if you want to walk around and look like a dumbass, that's fine. But be that as it may, I don't think that the NAACP should be campaigning on behalf of people walking around looking like dumbasses.
Wear a suit and tie a tie, and having black men come in as mentors and explaining to them that what it takes to be successful in this country, that presentation matters, instead of wasting their time trying to reinforce bad behavior. This kind of mixed messages coming from within the black community. People would actually go after.
It's not a mixed message.
It is a mixed message. You're saying that it's
also,
okay
Mark,
to behave like.
How is it not a mixed message if initially you said that it's not a problem, it doesn't display criminal behavior, and that you used to do it back in the day, and then suddenly, for some odd reason, you don't like it when you're teaching in high school? It doesn't make any sense.
A prisoner. Why
no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you shouldn't tell people that the reason they're getting harassed and profiled.
You should tell people to pull up their pants because you don't like it because you're their high school teacher, not because there's a logical reason behind it.
It's because of how low their pants are hanging. Because guess what? When you pull your pants up, you still get pulled over.
Malik is saying it's a contributing factor.
No, it is true according to all criminological data.
Malik,
Exactly.
why don't you button this up?
What I said specifically is we need to focus on how we choose to represent ourselves. We need to focus on how we choose to represent ourselves, and that we can contribute even if just a little way. And I made sure I did say that even if just a little way.
And I'm saying
because why
contribute.
Is there, and the reason
That's
why I say that is not only why do we have a strong police presence in our community? That's something that you have to be realistic about. Is it only because we are being racially profiled, or is it only because the cops have a reason to be in black communities in the first place?
All right.
Malik, can I ask Malik one quick question? Can I ask Malik one quick question?
Make it quick.
Yes, sir.
Malik, before people were pulling their pants down, did we still have a strong police presence in the same issues we're dealing with police right now?
Yes, we did, sir. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. But that was then, and this is not.
That's my point.
Why not? It's individual choice and responsibility. Every single person in this country has a choice.
So Marc Lamont Hill's whole premise is that you shouldn't tell people to pull their pants up because crime preceded the whole pants sagging thing.
To either behave like a criminal or they have a choice to behave like a reasonable person and carry themselves with respect.
I wish we had more time because I know this has hit a nerve with everybody, and there's so many more sentiments in which to express, but we are going to have to leave it right here.
That was the amazing commentary that Marc Lamont Hill gave, and this is some more of it.
I'm going to pull out.
Okay, so listen, let's move on and talk about something else. About Steve Harvey. And I'm going to get Mark, and then I'll get the others in. So, Mark, Steve Harvey went to Trump Tower and is taking a lot of backlash for meeting with the president-elect. What do you make of this controversy?
I love Steve Harvey, and I have respect for Steve Harvey, and I think his intentions were accurate, or appropriate, rather. So
he says, listen to what he said, okay? He said he loves Steve Harvey. He has respect for Steve Harvey. But then listen to what he says after
disagreement is the way in which he's being used by folk like Donald Trump. Again, his intention is just to have a seat at the table. But when you're at the table, you should have experts at the table. You should have people who can challenge the president at the table. I don't care if Steve's there, but if I'm Steve Harvey, I'm bringing Michelle Alexander. I'm bringing Cornel West. I'm bringing Amani.
So this guy is basically, he is a piece of crap. He is the minor league for all the people that he's mentioning now, name-dropping Cornel West. And, you'll see Mike Eric Dyson.
I'm bringing Eddie Glaude. I'm bringing Michael Eric Dyson. I'm bringing some folks who can challenge the president and inform the conversation. Otherwise, you're just being
Bruce,
trumpeted
why
up
are
there.
You saying, oh, my God?
Let me real quick. Because they keep bringing up comedians and actors and athletes to represent black interests is demeaning, it's disrespectful, and it's condescending. Bring some people up there with some expertise, Donald Trump. Don't just bring up people to...
What does Michael Eric Dyson have expertise at except for... being a thesaurus, being basically Mr. Boggle, I'm going to come up with words to say that'll make the sentence sound more complicated than the idea that it's expressing.
Entertain.
So you were at the meeting. You heard and saw everything.
I don't understand how anything I said would prompt that question.
Listen,
unless Steve Harvey turned into a policy analyst in the behind-the-scenes meeting, then it doesn't matter what I was there. I'm saying my concern was the people he's trumpeting up and putting in front of the cameras.
Mark, you weren't even there. You don't even know what happened. Okay.
Okay. Yes, I do. Are you disagreeing that he brought down? Are you disagreeing?
You weren't in the room, sir.
How does
you weren't there.
How does that negate my point that he brought Steve Harvey and then put him in front of the cameras?
Let me tell you
That's my critique.
Here's the deal. You don't know what happened. First of all, Pastor Darrell Scott, Michael Cohen, they are in a process of bringing all types of people from all over the country, from all different backgrounds, like we have. Remember the Diversity Coalition, where we reach out to all different types of people?
It was a bunch of mediocre Negroes being dragged in front of TV as a photo op for Donald Trump's exploitation.
So he goes from saying that he respects Steve Harvey and he loves Steve Harvey to saying that about Steve Harvey, which I think is pathetic.
Campaign against black people, and you are.
Okay, how are you gonna? So now you want to name call, Mark?
Simone, you better jump in if you want to talk.
Now you want to name call. Now you want to name call, and then you want to demarginalize.
Let me back Mark up here. Let me back Mark up here.
Simone has not spoken.
Let me back Mark up here because Mark's making an important.
Okay, since the name calling's been done, I guess we let the hippos talk.
Important point.
Mark
the point
is not making an important point. Mark is just talking.
Black people are diverse, okay? And for Donald Trump to only engage actors and comedians and, reality.
That's the person that showed up. It was Steve Harvey. You could have shown up too. They would have had to possibly get a different door for you, but you could have done it.
Type folks, he is not engaging in the diversity of black people in America. So again, I would like to see Donald Trump bring some policy analysts, some real people who have some meat on the bones for the issues.
Oh, meat on the bones. Looks like somebody's self-promoting.
To the table.
Danged if you do.
You got 10 seconds, Bruce.
So they need to be far less liberal. He ain't done. What do you mean, danged if you danged if you don't? He ain't done. That is the point.
You can actually bring qualified people.
Bruce is an expert, and he brought Bruce in.
No, it's not.
All right.
Yeah, you can bring in conservative icons. They don't have to be leftist.
What's your expertise?
All right, so that's it. I wish we had like a
Yeah, Marc Lamont Hill is a dumb fuck. I don't think that he deserved to be fired by CNN because Marc Lamont Hill is the exact type of clown that is on CNN. By the way, Paris Denard was fired a few months ago, not because of anything he said. Not because of anything he said that was on CNN. It was because of this allegation that was never substantiated that he had made a lewd gesture at a student who was taunting him when he was teaching at Arizona State. And he allegedly made masturbatory gestures and touched a woman's neck with his tongue. Never seen any proof of it, and nobody knows what the hell you're talking about. And they rejoiced over it, so that they love having people fired that they hate, even if there's no proof, even if there's no real substance behind an allegation, even if it has nothing to do with his job at CNN or whatever media outlet it is, because they hated Paris Denard, because he simply does not think the same way that they do. So they decided, well, we're going to support firing Paris Denard. Well, now you're going to see them supporting Marc Lamont Hill, this idiot, this moron. So no, I don't support his firing because I think he's perfect for CNN. CNN is a pathetic joke of a network. So I think they should keep Marc Lamont Hill. He's completely consistent with their programming. If you are one of these people that is offended at what he said at the UN, let me tell you what you should do. Stop watching CNN. Start watching networks that offer actual news. I would even say watch RT just to fuck with CNN. Watch this channel. Watch independent creators. Do something that will detract from CNN's audience, because that's really how you do it. CNN is basically it's the goose that killed the golden egg. So I think Marc Lamont Hill. Yes, he said some. First of all, what he said at the UN, we didn't go through that. But essentially, he was saying that violent means of resistance are on the table. Then he went on this tangent saying that advocating for nonviolence is absolutely necessary, but you cannot. But we can't. He said we can't rule out violent means. If you were following that, he said essentially we should advocate for nonviolence while leaving the door open for violence. That's contradictory. You can't do both. Either you're for nonviolence or you're for violence. Okay? You can't. There's no dial between them. There's no yellow area on the meter. You know, it's either you advocate for one, or that is a binary issue. Okay, this is not something where there is a spectrum. There's no violence fluid identity in terms of actions. An action is either violent or it is not. So that's about it. Fuck him, but I don't think he should have been fired by CNN. I don't care about CNN. I think that they're gradually degenerating into a puddle of tears. And, well, we'll see what happens from here. So please like this video, subscribe to my channel, subscribe to my second channel, Razor Ray Lab Wounds. Also, please share the video, comment when it uploads, subscribe to my GAB, and tip me at the Patreon. And I'll see you guys later.